Ik ea yoxatini, likat Johan. Kwasacha a Johan chosatin, jaka guantan koig. Yawachich tliat ge. Panachoe wuke, a de haschi ne ye. Ya yagi atlain tleite kutsati, ya akwan anikak ka dlan, wait late, ka dlan. Ka tleit qidi, panachoe, would do a nook, we a yaw de tea. Ye awa, at shoe atach she kadena at kachiakuchu, yag, kachakuk sa awa yuhan. Sekan and kwashi siu dakuch satan, echosakukha, aka away, gakwasla, kwashkiwe, it kadenach to achtuas, achtua oshka. Hell wasakukwa newe kote. Galchish yuxatini. Ja, naskiki kana tlech wush kanach gach da art. Like just ilsa ka gwall gone gachise ka we adak recording sa adati jik gine just kadena dati jinane aka a iti tlechiki su adati jigachune. Galchish Yito I guess a good thing get renach you latki. Okay. There was an important announcement in there. Can somebody recap it for me?
No class on Wednesday.
That's correct. Okay, so this is our only class this week, so we got to make the most of it. Any language thoughts or questions? Anything y'all wanted to share?
Kone, I have a sheet of paper, which I think I got from probably Littlefield. Kechwasakut. Shunget saye.
Kuchye.
Kuchye. But it has words for snow on it. It's a wonderful sheet, but it has two words for blowing snow. And I was wondering if you could distinguish them for me. One is kasisja, which is called blowing snow, and the other is Dleit for blowing snow. So what's the difference?
That's a good question. I think I made that thing. But yeah, it's so you sort of find these things, and so the origin of that was there's an outdoor studies program, and they invited me in, and I thought I'd do a presentation on snow because I kind of feel like there's a fascination with people and northern indigenous Native American languages where they're like, they have X words for snow. And think it does, but a lot of it is just like something late, something late, late, something late. So it's not that fancy. And so maybe other languages have fancier things to do with it. But I guess we could look at those two verbs. And I think actually I did this just the other day in intermediate Tlingit.
And I guess I'm asking the question because yagi tlach late dakwusitan ka yauditi.
Yeah. So Dleit ka uhu, and there was, I thought I had this one too. Maybe I narrowed it down to one, I think, on this one. Okay. But if we go look at the verbs that are behind those, we'll go with the dictionary, the verb dictionary. And the first one, we'll look up first. So is the verb to blow. And so you've got blowing, and we'll go look at these, and to blow something out. So you have blow, inflate, and blow out. So those are your 4 verbs that you get from that. And we'll check. We'll look these up and then we'll go see what Lear has. He might have additional verbs for these, right? And just to recap, when we look things up in this verb dictionary, it's going to show us 0 classifiers, then S, then L, then SH. Then it's going to show us the same verbs again, adding thematic prefixes, kind of, I think, alphabetically, and then also going 0, S, L, SH. So there's a logical system in how they list the verbs. And if you looked up a verb like nook, which we will, because since it was so windy today, it was so windy. Like we were running around doing some shopping because I thought, well, just in case we get socked in here for a bit, better get a bunch of food. And so we were at ʼatángi anka zantikahini what akanach away a yaw de tea tlayekechat wutien aka away tlayeye wuti. So we were down at Foodland, and this probably the biggest gust of the day maybe hit, and like I just had to just shield my face and just huddle up into a ball and let it stop. And it blew so hard that car alarms were going off in the parking lot. It was pretty cool. And so yeah, it's a good day to look up wind, and a good day to look up snow as well. But we'll see a nook verb for wind as well. So we'll go look up these ones, then we'll go look up s'ees, and we'll just sort of talk about what these things are. Okay, so we're going to blow. And so much of, like, I think advanced Tlingit is just getting these fine differences, this fine tuning between like these 3 different verbs that will be saying kind of a similar thing. So it's to start with, and we're going to see the s'ees one here as well in a second. So blowing on the hands, blowing a horn. So this is really to blow on something or to blow through something because you see it. Do jintaka uts. So that would be blowing inside of I think it's blowing inside of your hands because your jintak is your palm, right? And so this also gets this S apostrophe to do something in a series, in a pattern. And then to yeit is actually the name of a wind instrument. So inside, blowing, repeat in a pattern, below, thing. When we're going to look at some of these, there's another one of those yeit things. We looked at a bunch of keit things months ago, keit and keit and keit. So here's a yeit thing, which is there's above things and below things, basically, or on things and below things. Gach to we're going to blow on it. Then you get an L classifier to blow something around. And so with nation stories, sometimes you'll get 2 different verbs. They'll see number 1 and number 2. And I think that's them saying, we're not really sure what the difference is, but we're hearing this 2 different ways. Like, for example, well, I asked someone, well, it was one of my kids, so it doesn't sound weird. I said, and how would you translate that?
Something about shoes and today and no? Okay.
Blowing your nose?
No. Ihus age yitlaus yayagi.
Did you wash your feet?
Yes.
Oh.
And it was confusing. It's not a very common thing, but I'll just, okay. We got to get some context. And so the context is one of my kids has a owie on their foot. And so we went to the doctor and I looked at their foot and I was like, oh man. So, because I would wash my feet if I was going to show them to someone, but not everybody does. But what's interesting is washing your feet is an L classifier thing. And so some of them, you just get these interesting categories, because washing your feet and washing meat is the same verb. Other things you would say, yi age, Yijin, did you wash your hands? So that would just be a straight 0 classifier. For some reason, it switches to L. And so she was very confused. And so I just kept asking her, and then she would put it together. She's like, oh, no. So, which so
Renee,
right?
Renee, does yauk have anything to do with blowing out of your mouth? Because both of those words are blowing on his hands. So someone is exhaling, and blowing a horn, one would be exhaling also.
I think you end up with blowing on and then blowing around, perhaps. Like, so you're blowing on it. What's your intention? Because the intention with the ashes was to blow it. He blew it out of his hands, basically. And it's a very culturally specific thing because they became mosquitoes and stuff. But if your intention was to blow something to move it, which is not a very common thing, but let's say, yeah, if like I did an exercise in Albuquerque. We were working with, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to say this word, amaranth. It's challenging for me. And one of the things you do is it's a dried flower, and you crunch it all up, crunch, and you got to crunch it all up with your fingers. And then you do that. They would use a basket, but they just gave us a little foil thing to like cook a tiny loaf of bread in. And then what you would do is you would shake it and you would blow on it to get all the flower petals, the dried flower petals, to blow out of the thing. And then you're left with these like little seeds. It's a ton of, it's like not like hard work, but it's a lot of work for like a tiny bit of seeds. But it was very cool. And they're teaching youth at a school, at a language school where they teach, I think, 5 different indigenous languages, how to it's like a food and wellness center. It's amazing. It was incredible. But that would be, I think, sha'u, where you're blowing it off of something. So that's where I think that would be my theory on why there's these two things. Because you might be blowing on something, like in this case, you're blowing a horn and you're blowing on your hands to warm them up. But the other one, I think, is you're trying to move it with your breath. That's what I would guess. Then we get s'ees, and s'ees is like to drift. And so this is, I think of sailboats, I think of parachutes, I think of those windsurfers, so that you're using this now to, as a mode of, it's being blown around by the wind. So I would think of these things. If I were to think of what the difference were between these, and I'll ask some speakers, I'll send this up to Dleit, where they get a lot of the Dleit, and see what they think. But I would think one is like just generally it's being moved by the wind would be the ka'utsi one, or how do they say it? Dleit. So aka'uz and Dleit ka'uhu. So I would think that one, Dleit ka'uhu, would be like, it's snow that's just moving, but it's when it's flying around the road like it was today, I would think that's going to be the s'ees verb, because that's like the wind in your sails type of stuff. So we see here, s'ees, the barrel is being blown around by the wind. Cast at s'ees, hachinak yu akikade s'ees. It's always being blown away from us onto the other side. Kika is kind of a neat thing. Do we know what the kika is right there? It's kika, but when you put a suffix on it, it's kikade. Kika would be facing each other. So you had whoosh, kika, hit, these two houses facing each other. And then there were people from those houses, and they became whoosh, kika, hit, tan, which became whoosh, kitan. So they're important to know these little particles. Like some of them you don't see very often, But if you did have two things that were facing each other, I think you'll find this one in the Battle of the Giants story where they're sitting there looking at each other. So then you get s'ees, goods s'ees. The clouds have been blown away. Kayani, the leaves blow away on a regular basis. Then you do get one for blowing through your nose, which would be blowing through your nose loudly. And then you get for the wind to blow. Then you get uwahich, which is really interesting because that's just kind of a general doing verb. And so for the wind to be blowing, like today, you would say, oh, okay. Amaranth. I just saw that in the chat. Yeah, it was that's a lot of work. I'm sure they've got mechanisms of mass producing it now. But it was actually very calming. It was very because then you blow real gently and it just sort of it was medicinal to work on that food. It was really cool. And then so you get Ilja has to cut to. So this would really like a storm was blowing. So this would have been pretty appropriate in especially downtown Juneau today. Ilja hakat uwachich. The storm was really blowing on us. And then you could also say Dleit hakatu uwachich. The blizzard was really blowing on us. And so that's where, and so you also have nook, which is for the wind to be blowing. And the nook verb you're getting here is to feel something. So it's really interesting because you also get this d in there, right? The wind blows here from any direction, right? And so you got a bunch of stuff. And again, like these kind of things where that might be one or two verbs in English, but then English, you can add like up or away, or you can just add something to blow. But in Tlingit, what you're seeing is the classifier switching, the verb root switching. In some cases, a verb root that's just a very common thing, like he, a nook, and then it has just these specific things like, so uwachich, like you have to have some other information in that verb in order to get that it's the wind, I think. And we'll look up the nosh one just for fun. So here you have to sizzle, to steam, to blow loudly through your nose, and to steam berries. So this one is also to steam food. Like if you're going to cook salmon wrapped in skunk cabbage, where you have it on the beach and you build a fire on top of it after you wrap it really carefully and then you bury it in sand, like damp sand, and then you build a fire on top of it. And when it's cool, it's cooked. Okay. And just for good practice, we'll look at what Lear has as well for ooh. So here we start here, and so you got jach ach. The wind blew it away. So that L classifier again sure seems like it's saying for it to be moved by the wind. Ach kaut they blew away one at a time. Ashes, paper bags, shingles, but not people. Shad at a horn, like in a car. Blowing on themselves, I guess. It inflates itself. It inflates. They blow away one at a time. the wind is blowing the snow away. That's interesting. They blow them out. And blowing on a fire. They're blowing in their ear. And blowing them up, inflating them. Is puffed up. Blowing it up. Blew it up. Blew it to the right size. The wind blew the snow down to the beach. To blow them off. There's a wind for drying clothes. It is blowing weather. That's interesting. Blowing snow. Blowing on fire. Blowing it. Is air. I don't hear that used very much though. Is the spray from a blowhole. I think that's also the name of the blowhole itself sometimes. Bloated, gassed up, inflated. So we got a bunch of stuff on here. Blowing on it, blew on it, played a musical instrument, inflating it, blew it up, moved it by blowing. Is that a repeat? Oh, I think we got stuck. Okay. Blow out. Yeah, because you can also blow something out. Like this would be to like blow out a candle or something. And the last one would be s'ees. Should be here. So you've got ķutí, breeze that causes ripples, blown by the wind or sailed, took offense, got blown away, snow falling into a pile, the wind blowing things around, blown by the wind. Yeah, I guess that's it. But that's for sailing. I know that's a sailing verb. So, and it's also the one I think Nora used. She said, Haji nach kautlitz or something like that. Any thoughts? Or are you blown away yet?
Is s'ees a gentler sort of blowing?
That's a good question.
Than
I know that s'ees can only be the wind and it can't be like a person, I think. So it's probably a bigger, more sustained movement would be my guess, because that's used for sails and, you know, I think it implies like motion by wind, whereas the other one is more just blowing. So the focus, because then a person could do it, the wind could do it. And so I guess you'd have blow and then blown around. Would probably be the main difference.
and it's cheesh.
She said, so at one point Nora said, this is from the Raven book. I don't know what's going to ever happen with that thing. But right after Richard Downhower's funeral, she gave us this incredible speech. And lucky for us, Kathy Reddy was fast and smart, because we were kind of gathered. We didn't know how the meeting was going to go. I don't think we were excited to have the meeting that day, but everybody was leaving town. We had this team of people working on this Raven book. And so we had to talk about how we're going to finish it and what we're going to do. And I don't think anybody really knew what to say. And then Nora just started speaking in Tlingit, and Kathy grabbed her phone and hit record, and luckily recorded it. And at one point, this was the part I was thinking of. Hachinak dak kanats ayach awayati awayatlinkiti ʼatángi. And she talked to me about it later. She said, even though it was a sad thing, it was like a pretty little metaphor. She just pictured this parachute just like getting blown out to sea, you know. But I think Cyril had something similar, but I think he said ʼutlahash. So ʼutlahash would be to be floating on the waves. And then even there, so like ʼutlahash would be for something to drift or to float. But then you could also have a ḳautlatit, which would be the waves carried it. So then you have different, did it just sort of float away, or did the waves carry it? Was it blown somewhere, or was it really blowing around? And so that's where I think that s'ees would be the stronger, like, you know, when you were driving, if you were driving to downtown Juneau today, it was just like snow just flying all over the road. And it looks pretty cool, but it's also a little scary sometimes. And a cheesh. So I said we did these keit things forever ago. Keit, keit, sakeit, sunkeit, takeit, ḳakeit, ḳuskeit. This is like week 1 of this, back in August. So I thought we'd revisit this and look at the yeit things. Anyone heard or have any predictions about what duck yeit would be? There's a verb root on there, I think. But it's not a very common verb. It is a wooden container or canoe used for rendering grease, which would still be used today, but I'm guessing not very many folks would know the Tlingit name of that thing. So it's the thing below the grease rendering. So awadak would be, they rendered grease, usually from sock or tsaw. But I guess at one point, cheech. So not done anymore. I gotta ask my uncle what that stuff was used for. What about yeit? Any predictions, guesses?
Water container.
Water container or a pail. So there you see it, hin. And what we got here with yeit is ye ut. Ye is below, ut is thing. So just like before we had ka'ut, Tlingit will not allow two vowels to, they just can't run into each other without changing shape. So this is one of the most common things that happens as they go to an A vowel. I think I have a different, okay, this is one way to say it, but this is how I actually like to say it. I thought I changed these. There. Jinda utsku yeit. Any predictions?
Sink, because it's where you wash your hands.
That is correct.
Yeah.
And so you could change jin to tsik. And what do you got now? Tsik to usku yeit. Everything but the kitchen sink.
Kitchen sink.
Yeah, away. So jinda utskuyi, the thing below which people wash their hands, right? So, or the, I don't know how to do that in English, but hands, people washing below a thing. Okay. What about kadadza yeit? There's a verb kadets, but it's a certain way to get things.
Is that like what you hold below soap berries when you beat them off the bushes?
That's it. And there is, sometimes it's just called tosh. So it kind of depends on where you go. It's actually the same But here's my theory. I bet you it's called tosh for Southern Tlingit folks because we don't have soap berries. And soap berries are like you grab it and you hit it. And kadets is the verb to hit the bushes so that the berry falls down. And maybe there's other berries that you kind of would just grab and put into a low flat basket. But maybe without hitting the berries plant. But yeah, so there's kadets. What about yeit? Oh, I just saw Bob's Red Mill in the chat. Bob a kausha uch amaranth. Ekahweni. Hook. Okay, what's cut? Anybody know what katsuk is as a verb?
Is that like spit?
No. Yeit. It's frying pan. So now you have katsuk, yeit. And so it's to fry something to a crisp. So if that's a frying pan, what do you think this one would be? Te yeit.
Is it a tea kettle?
It's not. That one is tawak isha, which I guess is a bucket shaped like a goose. I don't know.
An iron skillet.
That is correct. A cast iron skillet is just called rock frying pan. I don't know why. It's heavy, maybe. Yeit. Now, katek is interesting because katek is very close and katek is also close, but katek is not either of those. So katika is a key. It's a twister, but this is a different, I think it gets confusing because twisting and fishing and this verb are all very similar. And so is heart. Heart is like teich. A steich is fishing. Kaudze teich is twisty. But kateich is different. We know the verb kateich. You use a tuck when you kateich sometimes. It is to smash. Oh, we were using one of these at the same place we're using the amaranth, but for something different. We'd put a whole bunch of things into a yeit, and then we would do something that made it into tea.
Is it a blender? Maybe?
Close. It's a similar type of thing, but it's more hand.
Is it a mortar?
It's a mortar. Yeah, but mortar for pounding, right? And so the verb is katecha, even though you're not always like slam, like sometimes you're grinding that thing, but yeah, it's still, so this would be to smash something. And so this is a verb that's used in the Battle of Sitka story to talk about somebody doing something to the heads of the little Russians, but that's for another time. And what about shayet? Maybe the most recognizable yeit of them all.
Hello.
Yeah, away. Pillow. Head below thing. Easiest one on the list. So now you've got the keit and the yeit down. Just sort of like I thought it would just be fun to just think about compound nouns and how they work and what these things are generally doing. So sheesh. Now, I just want to talk about contraction a little bit, and then we'll get back to a couple of our narratives. I think we'll do 1 and 2. We'll see how far we get. Does everybody know how these things, what this is showing us? This is showing us a lot, I think.
Could you give me an explanation, please?
Yeah, sure. So to conjugate verbs in Tlingit, almost all of the magic happens in this one spot. And so this, it's a grouping of 4 different spots. So each of these spots can have a thing, and you can have up to 3 things. I don't think you can have more than that, but maybe. Okay, I don't know. I'll have to think about that. But basically, so you have spot 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they're numbered because that's the order that you would hear them or say them. And so we would write them left to right, ga on the left, to the right next to it, 0 qa or na right next to that, and then y or qa right next to that. So these ones here, these last 2, are the closest to the subject marker and to the classifier. This one is closer to the object and to the thematic prefix. So the important thing to remember is that ga is to the left of the aerialis. And then the other thing is on category 1 and on category 3, that's where you will find all of the conjugation class prefixes. So that means if you're going to say be good, egak e, that one. If you're going to say eat it, ha, that one. If you're going to get, whoops, there go the balloons. Oh, it's atunach katutle uchuat, the thing that people inflate. And if you're going to say sit down, qana, it's that one. And if you're going to say go to sleep, nata, it's that one. So only 1 and 3 contain those ones. And those ones are linked specifically to verbs, right? So every verb has a conjugation class that will tell you what conjugation prefix will pop up in certain verb modes. Any questions about that?
I think that I can start to make sense of this by saying, this is how I recognize there are futures.
Yeah.
Because they have.
Which 3 are needed for the future?
Ga, gu, ga.
Yep. So there's the ga, there's the and which ga is it? This one.
How do I say the last one?
Ga.
To describe where on the chart, not sha, which would be the first one, but the last one.
Oh, like the bottom? Yeah, you'd say well, I guess you could say a talk would be if it's inside and at the bottom of a container.
Goodness, geez.
Which we were at a Ḳutí, and some wonderful Kagwantan people kept coming over and filling up my coffee cup, which was wonderful because it was 18 hours and I was already tired when the thing started. And it was so wonderful and magical. But someone sitting across me said, "Where did you get your cup? You've just been drinking out of that cup all day." And I said, "There's no bottom to it." And everybody laughed because they all understood Tlingit at that. It was a Tlingit speaking table. It was very fun.
So how do we, what's the difference between the two ga?
Yes, that's a great question. This one is the true conjugation prefix attached to the verb. If it's not a qa conjugation verb, you're not going to use that. You won't. It has to be this one. This modal one is attached to a whole bunch of specific verbs: future, hortative, purposive, potential, conditional. When you say nach tu at, you're saying na, qa, tu, at. So this one is what we call a modal one. So it just like it says, I can tag team with any of them. These ones, they can't really do that. Like, and so usually if you're getting like there is one exception to like I would say ga, ka, and na. They're not used for anything else except for na, which is used in all progressives. So when you say ya nagut, ya anasquain, ye anasquain, this is the na that you're using. So usually they're dependent, though, on the conjugation type, right? So if we say the verb is to grab something, right? So you say, I was shot. If you want to command someone to grab it, you need to know that this is ga conjugation. So you can say gashat. And if it's gashat, then if you're going to use a hortative, you're going to have ga and qa. So when Cyril George says something like ʼatángi, ʼati, shingit, qa, and qa. And so like part of learning how these prefixes work is learning what's the difference between these things. And knowing their names and knowing exactly what they do and why they function, it's not, you don't need that. But what you do need to know is to say, okay, there's these 4 categories and you just got to grab, however you want to think of it, like this magic combination, like a little combination lock. Like, okay, if this is a 1 and this is a 3 and this is a 4 and this is a 7, then the lock will open, right? And so a similar thing, but instead you have the mode, which says, okay, you need to add these things to get into this mode. And so they get kind of activated and they will appear in a certain order. Sometimes like this ga being on this side, I think that there's only a few cases where it's going to matter. Like there's a kind of an advanced verb mode where you say, so it doesn't happen. Like you say, ye unatika, na, right? And so you're going to have una. And you'd say also, ke utika. So no one gets hurt. So it doesn't go out of control. It's rare, but you can see it. And so if you want to say, because this came up during COVID, because we were trying to say, wash your hands so you don't get sick. And we end up with igu nika. And so it became gu because this is on the outside of So you have gu, but in other cases you'd have qa and na, right? That's a lot. I feel like that's a lot. Okay. But the only thing you got to keep in mind is like specific to the conjugation type: command, hortative, potential, habitual. Those are the 4 that will activate the conjugation prefix that is attached to the verb. So if you want to say, again, be good, igake, be strong, ikletsin. Change this to a K and we'll talk about why that is. You want to use a hortative? You can, right? So you could say, gachletsin, let it be strong, right? A potential. So the potentials will also include any of those can't do it. They can't do anything about it. Na, ka, si. That's going to be your combination. And then the habituals. So the habituals would be h. It's always good, right? Or you could say h. I'm always good. It sounds like you're bragging a little bit if you say that, though. So maybe say it about a third person. Okay, so the mode is what, so just thinking about this thing is designed to show you some things like, what do we call these things? What are they used for? What order do they appear in? The next thing is what happens when you start contracting them. If you take this vowel out of ga, it becomes a K. all of those verbs where you see the K as the first letter, kwa, good, that is the g with the vowel knocked out of it. So there's no mystery on why that K is there for the future. And same with ituwu cutscene, Klatseen. There's, so you have ga, shla. That's three things. So think it once it gets into three things, it says, can anybody get rid of a vowel, please? Because you get too long. And basically, here's the thing. If you can get rid of the vowel and not change the meaning, then you're fine. It'll drop that vowel because g and the K are the same thing. I think it has no problem going back and forth. The only thing to remember with well, I mean, as far as contraction, is when it encounters cha, it jumps to the other side, just like the perfective marker does. So with the G switching to the K, that matches up with what we learned before. Like a K can turn into a G. Yay. Both directions, right? So if you have something that ends with a K and you add a suffix to the end, it turns into a G, right? But the underlined G, you would expect it to turn into an underlined K, and it doesn't. If you take the vowel out of it, it turns into an underlined X. Just know that that's what's going on. When you say gachtu, nachtu, any of those things with that, not all the time because there's a first person, but when you get into those types of things, that's what you're encountering. You have na, and then you have qa, then you have tu. The qa is the thing that has the softest, you could take that vowel out. Nachtu'at, let's go. So that's what you're encountering right there. The other thing to remember with qa is you have qa. If you have qa and kha, they'll usually get qa. So you could say, ate nakagut, let me go there. Yeah. I'it qadishi, can I help you? Or i'it qadishi, let me help you. With na, you can take the A out, and that's where you get yanagut, yanchagut, nigut. It is blending, I guess. Okay. With the perfective marker, it jumps on the other side of cha, just like this one. That's why you say chwasaku, chwagut, chwacha. It just jumps to the other side. When you encounter the perfective marker and the second person subject, if it's zero conjugation, you'll get iya. Otherwise, you'll get ye. And so this is where it gets, but it also has to have a zero classifier or a ya classifier as well. So you're going to have hot iya gut, wait ye good, right? And then the other thing here is when you have a vowel, the perfective marker contracted to a W, and then a vowel and consonant, that's where you're going to get the M. Any questions about that stuff? It's a lot. I know it's a lot. But this, I'll put all these slides up there so you can look at them, think about them. I'll eventually make a whole bunch of examples. But there's no guesswork involved for contraction. There's a lot to remember and a lot to look for. But I think our goal should be to just memorize stuff. Okay, I got to memorize this prefix. Okay, so you could do that. But then at some point, you got to learn the mechanics of it. So then you could start saying, okay, I see what it's doing. I'm ready to start using hortatives. I'm ready to start using these other ones. Yay. Okay. Everybody okay? It's a snowstorm of conjugation. Let's get back to our stories, our narratives. So we're going to work on number 1 for a second, or for a bit. Oh, we left off on hot water. Okay, let's see. The first test. Oh, Shashkwan.
I was just wondering real quick how to download the updated file from plinketlanguage.com, because when I tried to, I think I just downloaded a page of code.
Oh, okay, it should download, but the key is like if the browser, is the browser trying to open it?
Yes, my browser is trying to open it.
Okay, hold on. Let me try it in a different browser. Okay, so if we go to, yeah, let's see what happens. It's probably going to show me a bunch of code here. But usually depending on what kind of browser you use, like, so, like there it is. That doesn't help me very much at all. But I can push this download button here, and this is Firefox. If you're using Chrome, then it's usually down here. I don't know what it looks like I'll try it on Safari as well, but if I hit this download button, it should be fine once it saves it. Because then, but let me double check it. Yeah, it works fine. I think what you need to do though is find the download button on whatever browser you're using. So, and I have 3 web browsers installed. So I have Chrome, Firefox, and Safari, because some of them work better for different things. And so you could try one of those and let me know if it works.
Okay, sheesh.
Uh-huh.
And then do I just upload it then into Elon?
Yeah, so then you could just I gotta stop saying just, right? Because I'm like, oh yeah, you just do the conjugation prefixes, right? So then you drag it to the folder where your Elon stuff is, and it'll ask you if you want to replace the existing file, and you say yes.
Okay, sheesh.
And then it'll automatically link to the media. Okay. Wait, hold on. Let me close that one so I don't get myself confused. Okay. Here's the big test. Can you folks hear this? And will I be able to hear it? Okay. So where we left off is he's talking about drinking hot water, and his people would always say this to his dad. So this is what people would always say to him. Right. And it's a bit, so he says my father, but then he has a verb that's conjugated with the 4th person subject. That means the 3rd person object is his father. Let's see what people say to him. So we're ending with the, oops. Right.
Conduct. Is there a yaniku in the middle?
Oops. Yes, I got the wrong letter there. There's one thing at the end of this. What are you folks hearing?
Sati.
I might expect that, but it sounds like that. So there's two types of things that can be kach. One of them would be to be moving along top of something, and the other one is for something. Like you say, I'm working on strength. Like you're either going into the cold water, you're lifting weights or something. And then kach would be off the top of it. And then there's something. Well, you got this again. Oops. Let me go over there. There's some kind of thing starting with t, perhaps right there.
There's the syllable after heen.
Mm.
Or maybe it's that off.
Oh, yeah, it's atluknuch, I think.
I'm hearing something just before nooch.
Oh, for atluknuch?
Maybe not.
Yeah, I think it's just atluknuch, but there might be a tiny little vocalized peg vowel, perhaps. So. Okay. What are you folks thinking? What do you think this is talking about?
He's saying drinking hot water is good for your health.
Yeah, it's good. There's something, some sort of sickness that it's helping, right? When I first listened to it, I thought I was talking about maybe like adding honey or something, but I'm not hearing that ʼatángi.
So what is gandus ate?
I don't know. Like, so ʼaji is a B. ate would be like, well, this is something I think, so like if we look at how these words are generally working, right? So you have ganda, which means around the fire. And it can get confusing too, because gun, this is where I think we talked about this. Gun as a high tone word, as a high short vowel, is firewood. But you see a bunch of things with, and so you do see things like pecking on the wood for a woodpecker. And you see, I think it's kind of like claiming the old wood or the firewood, maybe as like a bumblebee. But then you start getting into these ones that are referring to fire, which makes you think there's a low tone version, perhaps, that's talking about fire. Because you have gandateyi, the rocks around a fire. Ganguk is fish heads cooked by the fire. Gandagiti, smoke spreaders. And so gankadetzik, the dish for offering the food at a ʼku'i, gankateyi. And so you have some things, guntu inside the fire. So if gandatate is one we might check on that, but it could be someone who tends to a fire. It could be someone who builds a lot of fires. It could be someone who works around the fire. It could be like smoke inhalation type of thing. That's what makes me think of.
I noted in the dictionary that there was a gandus aji hatl, and that was honey.
Yeah, right.
But would this be that contracted?
But then if he says yuck, okay, it's possible. But I'm pretty clearly hearing ʼate and not hotly, because I would expect to hear that, at least to hear that. I like, again, coming back to contraction, you can contract things, but if there's those sounds that really are needed to link to meaning, if those are gone, then maybe not. So there's something here too. I'm just going to leave it. And we can come back and maybe the piece. And so whenever you do this work too, if you're dealing with an advanced speaker, there's some things where you're like, okay, close, I can get it for now. Let's keep going. Then you come back to those things later, because then you'll have the context of what's around it. What are you folks hearing here?
You adaya dukkha niche.
Okay. And how would we translate that?
That's what they always said.
And there's two hymns.
To him. Yeah.
Adaya I think it's like this. Because there shouldn't be any third person pronoun on there. Okay. I gotta pause for a second. Keit keit.
What's that verb that means to go to the bathroom?
Gande nagut.
So a different gun.
Yeah. So, but that one, so when we look at gun, just to kind of recap, let's see. I think I need to make a note. Hold on. Don't remember if we talked about these ones in here or not. But if we did, it's a good time to recap. So we have gun, gun, gone, gone. These are 4 different things, but possibly related things. And what do we know? What is gun? The first one.
Firewood.
Yep. I think there's a low tone gun, which we just looked at a bunch of words related to it.
Fire.
And then a high tone long, a high long, gone.
Sunshine.
Well, there is like for something to burn or to be lit, which is a verb. There's a verb root gone. Yeah. To light or burn, which is probably again related. It's 2 left. Gone day night.
Yes, outside.
Yeah, away.
Outside.
Last one. Gone. Long and low. There's 2 meanings for this one. This is pretty wild. One of them.
Smoke hole.
Yeah, away. Last one.
Going to the bathroom.
Well, there is gun. So there's this related thing that we're going to get to where this one is used to say go outside or to go to the bathroom. The soft spot on a baby's head is called gone. So all of these things I do think are related concepts, right? It's like a group of concepts that are really neat because there's just like the shifting of the vowel is the only thing that separates them on sound. And then the meaning is these related concepts. And then from there, you do have this thing where you could say, or, this is how, when speakers tell the story that makes people laugh, there's these things. So the verb is the same, but saying, gan dek kwagut, most people are going to interpret that as I'm going outside. But if you say, gan dek kwagut, I'm going to go poop. Right. So those are the ways that those 2 things, like vowel length makes a big difference. But I think also, like it's probably comes from a euphemism that they just had to sort of shift it somehow to say, okay, because, You would do a similar thing in English. You would just change the way you say it. Like you say, I'm going to go behind that tree. That's different than I'm going to go behind that tree, which is sort of signaling like, I'll go to the bathroom over there. Don't go over there. That's usually kind of what you're saying with stuff like that. Good question. See what comes next.
Renee, I just had another question about tone, and it's just before that where that kach there. How do you know when that's high and when that's low? Like
Yeah, that's a good question. So here, yeah, you could say kach, like it sounds like, and when you have speakers like this, like his voice is already kind of a higher pitched voice, and he speaks pretty quickly. So catching the tone, I think, can be really tricky. But in terms of like, what could that thing be? Because, well, I guess we'll listen to it one more time. Because it could be this. Could it be this?
I'm just asking, like generally, is there a time when kach goes high and a time when it goes low, or like just more like here it sounds high to me, but just generally is how does that work? Okay,
I think I had. Oh, here it is. So I was kind of doing this thing. So when we have ka, we get these certain patterns with ka. If it's going to be this one, right? Which this one pops up all over the place in Tlingit. Like, so if we add dach to ka, we can get ka dach or ka. So this is the one that is low. To say off of, because otherwise we get, because then we'll go down and we'll look at what happens. Like, so this is really interesting. Like, what does this vowel do? And when we get into ka and ya, they will follow the exact same patterns, because this is what it tells you whether it's the ya for the face or the ya for the right here, because they do slightly different things. So this one, the general pattern that we expect is when you add a suffix, it drags it long and low. And we're going to see that a lot of times. Ka, dach, and kach. But you're going to get some exceptions to this too, right? So from the top of, and then when you add day, it's going to go long and low. So you get ka day. But it happens to us all the time where, we're listening to something and you expect speakers to say it, something like I day huskuch de she, right? So it should go I day. That's what we expect it to do. But if you listen real carefully to that George Davis speech where he talks about kindness and just put love and kindness in your heart, he says, Gwashi I day huskuch de she. But maybe there's something he's doing there with like meaning and emphasis, which we haven't studied a whole bunch. Like when you say wasa iati, one of those is higher than the others, and it's the first one. Wasa iati, right? You could just hear it's like wasa iati. It sort of steps down. And we haven't done a whole lot to sort of say there is actually tone within the tone. We just go high low because there's so much to learn with Tlingit. But so this one would be like to go over the top of, it's going towards over the top of, like you're going to put it on the table or it's going to be on something. But with kanach, we get kanach or kanach. You have those two options. So it's either going to do what we expect, where it gets dragged down to a long low tone. And if you look at dach and nach, we learned that those suffixes, they stay long and high. They like to be long and high. Nach and dach like to, or short and high, sorry. But here you get a total flattening of everything. Kanach. And if you listen to some speakers, like I think when you listen to Kei, she uses that one a lot. It's just short and low on both. And then you get, so that's through the top of or along the top of. cut. That one's short and high every time to arrive at the top of, or to be, at the top of. Kabu, that one likes to be that way as well, right? And so there you have it. You can't have it be kawu. It just doesn't allow that for some reason. It's kabu. And again, like, I don't know if anybody has studied like intensely what these vowels are doing and why. For me, I just have to remember them. And kuk, these next ones are all going to be, we have kuk or ka. Those ones, you could pick what you want to do. So it's going to be kuk. It'll be short and high like that. But it's pretty common that it'll just gobble up that suffix. But if it does, I would always expect it to go, so you'd say a ka ye wuti. It was there. A kuk ye wuti. But I wouldn't expect a ka ye wuti. Right? So you just get that lengthening by absorbing that suffix. And then you have kach. And so this one, it gets tricky because there is a rarely used one, kach, which means for. Like you'd say, it's used a lot in certain verbs, though. I think it's used in specific verbs. Like you say, atki, atkach, gende agach tu deil. We're going to protect the land. So then the kach is on there. Or you say, ikach du inka kwashagao. I'll fight them for you. Right? Which would be like someone's picking on you. We're in a hockey game and someone keeps picking on you and you're the star player and I'm the enforcer. Then I might tell you in the Tlingit huddle, ikach du inka kwashagao. I'm going to go fight them for you. I'll protect you. But then that's also like hayu ʼatángi kach shagao, which is what Marge Dudson said. Fight for your language. Fight for our language, actually. So yeah, the vowels are complicated. And it's just one of these things. There's a bunch of patterns that are predictable. Then there's just a bunch of patterns you have to remember. And I don't know any other way around it. Someone might find like some big answers for us. But for me, I just have to memorize those things. And I just have to, but I listen to them too. And then they start to make sense. But when you're listening to a speaker, I do think you're getting a lot of vowel fluctuation. And then that's why I say, like, when you get to those complicated parts, mark it as a question mark. It's like, I think he's saying like that it gets the sickness out of people. Maybe I don't know, because maybe he wanted to say tu dach, but then he just sort of just got to the, maybe he started saying tu, like the inside of something. Like, let's listen to it again. Right. So maybe as he is talking, like, because you think and you speak very fast, like it's a very fast thing when you're like a high fluency speaker like this. So you could that could be but maybe tu dach is what he wanted to say. But maybe he had already, as he kind of, you can hear him kind of correct himself right there, but then maybe he just moves on, it's a lot of theorizing at this point because he's not here, so we could ask him.
That helped, but basically those three top ones can drag it long, eh? Dach and de is what you're saying, eh?
Yeah.
Okay.
But then the T and those three ones that both, well, all of them that mean at, kabu, cut, tuk, and kach, they just attach, which is interesting, right? And so it works for ya as well. So you could say atcha iti ikyabu. You got crumbs on your face. You got some kind of food thing on your face. And then what's interesting is I never know which side to show people their food is on their face. Do I show them it's on your left side? So I usually act like I'm on a mirror, right? And be like, atcha yabu. And then they always do the wrong side, though. I don't know. Anyways, we'll do one more. What do you folks hear?
Attack. Ḳukahaa, not coffee.
So it ends with
Yeah.
he says coffee.
He says coffee.
Feel guilty
Okay.
drinking coffee now. And what about at the beginning?
Thinget ahin.
Let's look at this first part. I think he starts with klesh again. And then you get the tlugin. What comes after the tlugin?
Chalk.
How are we going to translate that? So we kind of have the thing that's being talked about right here. We have klesh, which is not, and that's getting us to the verb. But then there's also this decessive suffix on it, right? So if you said klesh tlug,
Right.
people don't drink it, right? Is what you're saying, right? Which is really interesting. Like ḳukahaa is people don't eat it. Yeit, it's not edible, right? And so the fourth person sometimes gives a lot of meaning to particular things. But then, so this kind of leads me to, the yabu. So you'd say at. Well, let me put it here first. So coming back to our notes, the thing I had on get crumbs on your face, you'd say ʼatángi, yeit, it's crumbs. Yabu, crumbs on your face. And so the other thing, so we have this. And then you can also do this, which I think go like this. And then you could say, so these are doing slightly different things here. And do we know what this suffix is doing?
Does it make it like didn't used to?
Yes. Right. So basically this suffix is like used to, but not anymore. Right. So you could also say, you could say that. And I think you could also say, oops. You say that. So, but what happens here is we get a negative. It's a bit of a double negative here. So how would I translate kesh khosaku?
I don't know.
So then how would you translate techosakuan?
I didn't used to know.
Yes, or I used to not know. Right. And so it's like, but now I know. Right. And so this was interesting because the first time I heard this is we're speaking Tlingit and sharing some information. And then someone said, techosakuan. I was like, oh, how cool. I used to not know, but now I do know. Right. So this is also telling you something. So then you have chosakuan.
I used to know it, but maybe now I don't.
Yeah, right. Oh yeah, this should have it on all of them. Oops. So then so you could say tlech ich
I didn't see you. I don't see you.
I don't see you. Tlech ich
Used to not see you.
Yeah, which is like maybe I had not seen you. Right? So the context would be like, oh, I hadn't seen you, right? But now I do. And then chosatinen. And again, like there's probably different ways to interpret these, but then you could probably end up with, I saw you, but don't anymore. But that, it's just like, what is Tlingit communicating, which is these little teeny particles. And sometimes when you go English to Tlingit, you start with 5 English words and you get 10 Tlingit words out of it. But sometimes you go, oh, for Tlingit, it takes you 10 words to do that. We could do it in 1 or 2 or 3, right? And so it's really interesting because languages just work differently. So when we come back to this phrase, people used to not drink hot water, not coffee. Or I guess you gotta get the long time ago. So he's probably saying they do now, though. Coffee. So people, but then it's interesting, like how you want to do that same thing in English, because the English gets kind of interesting. Sometimes you got to rearrange it to get it to do the same thing in the English language. Okay, but enjoy all your hot beverages over this long weekend. And we'll be back in 7 days. Take it. So we got about halfway through this recording. So that means try and make it a minute longer on whichever recording you're working on from where we left off. So this is how far we got in this one. Let's see. For recording 2, and we're maybe 1/4 of the way through that one. And for dog made a noise. For recording 3, let me see. Johnson. And it looks like we made it maybe 1/5 of the way through the 3rd one. So there's quite a ways to go on all 3 of these, but we'll keep pushing on them, and they show us a lot. It is a complicated speaker, and so it might take us through the end of the semester, but we'll work on getting them done. And wherever we end up, like I'll take them to the finish line and post the answers so you folks can check your work if we don't get done. But it's fun stuff. It's also very challenging. But we'll do a little bit of Elon with the speaker who's speaking much slower and a little bit more measured, just in terms of like thinking of what specifically speaking to learners. So the thing is, like, you have a speaker who someone's probably just like, tell this story. And so they just go full speed, full bore, and so for us, like it's a big step for all of us. And so Johan.
Fish.
Gonna sheesh.
Sheesh.
Ah,
Sheesh.
Sheesh.
Goodness, sheesh.
Sheesh.
3, 2, 1.
Sheesh.
Eat something good.
Ḳukahaa. Wa'etsu.
Ḳune, I had a question real quick.
Let me stop the recording.
Okay.